Right, without further ado, it's a great pleasure to welcome our next guest, who is dialing in remotely. Major Heather Stanning is a serving British Army officer, currently commanding a battery within the Royal Regiment of Artillery. Some of you will know Heather became a prominent public figure when she won Olympic rowing gold in London in 2012 with her partner, Helen Glover. They went on to become the first female British rowers to hold the Olympic, the World, European and World Cup titles simultaneously in 2016 when they retained their Olympic gold in Rio. An absolutely iconic moment for British rowing history and for female sport. Given these accolades, Heather is uniquely experienced and well-placed, both from a perspective of understanding Olympic programs to also her experience within the Army. Heather, welcome to the conference today.
Colonel, thank you very much for that introduction, and yeah, thank you very much for having me on today. Sorry I can't be there with you, but I'm going to stick to kind of my standard slide pack, if that's okay. I'm quite a visual learner, so for those of you listening in, if you asked to compare and contrast high performance in the military and elite sport, and I'm going to do this with kind of, or through the lens of building a winning team, because that's kind of my experience when I look at elite sport. And bear in mind that my experience in sport is rowing. Rowing being a sport where I suppose there are few outside factors that are needed to influence the crew. However, they do have an impact. Whilst for all of us in the military, I'm sure that we have all experienced the kind of the no plan survives contact phrase. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to explore the attributes of a winning team. I'm going to look at failure and how this is used to build resilience. And then I'm going to touch on communication, which I think is fundamental. And then finally, talk a little bit about teamwork. So what makes a winning team? The point about this slide is that kind of there's a whole plethora of things out there, but you could change the name in the middle. It could be team, athlete, soldier, and it's all still broadly relevant. From the individual's perspective, yes, there's the physique, the drive, the determination and the talent, but also there's a huge amount of support that's required. From a collective perspective, there's the bits that bring you together as a team, and ideally that's something like a common goal. Never forgetting kind of all the behind-the-scenes support, whether it's scientific, logistical, emotional, medical. The team isn't just what you see in front of you on any given time or day. My experience as an athlete really showed me that no matter how good you are as an individual, without the kind of collective support and the input from all of these areas, you were never going to perform at your best, and you certainly weren't going to be winning against the best. In a military context, there are some of these areas that I've experienced in the British Army, and I experienced them doing them very well. But there's other areas that only recently I think people have actually seen them as being important factors. If I talk about nutrition as an example, which I acknowledge there's been some huge changes in the last 5 to 10 years on this, but when I joined the British rowing team, within weeks I was sat down with the nutritionist, talking about my diet, going through every calorie I ate and at what time of day. I suppose her question to me was I really optimizing my fuel input for both my performance and recovery? I'd suggest there's still some way that we can go on this front in the military, although we have made huge leaps in this area in the right direction. But bear in mind kind of the ration packs we used to eat when I went through Sandhurst, and I don't think it was that long ago, I'm not too old yet, but yes, they were calorie dense and they did the job of absolutely fueling the soldier, but too many weeks eating the same kind of dense diet really played havoc with some people's digestive systems. You're then having an uncomfortable soldier being asked to be alert, perform at their best, when they're not actually fueling themselves optimally. I was naive at the beginning of my rowing career that I thought calories had to kind of match, calories in had to match calories out in a 24-hour period. I had no idea that the time of day you ate your big meal had an impact, or even how long before and after exercise you needed to eat. Culturally in the UK, I think a lot of us, we eat our big meal at the end of the day, and this is a really terrible model. We go to bed on full tummies, our bodies don't necessarily process all of this efficiently, and they do it, or if they do process it efficiently, it's to the detriment of a good night's sleep. So what, I suppose the question is, should we be treating ourselves and our soldiers more like professional athletes when it comes to nutrition rather than kind of amateur fitness enthusiasts? I'm going to pick out 2 of these other areas on the screen to talk about in a bit more detail, and that's endurance and resilience. So endurance being the ability to just keep away, while resilience is about the ability to bounce back again and again. In both the military and elite sport, these characteristics are essential to ensure success, but you could almost group them together with robustness, which could be identified as the quality or condition to being strong and in good condition. As an athlete, I needed to be in physical peak performance, and I needed to be physically, I needed physical endurance to do what I needed to do. Being physically as fit as possible, keeping my body in physical peak form, not only to conduct the training I was doing, which was a huge amount, up to 6 hours of physical training a day, but also to then be in a position to then compete on the world stage. In the military, the physical element, I think, is really important. But I think what I've learned during my time in the army is actually the mental component to endurance is almost more important than the physical. As an athlete, I chose to be where I was. It was me putting myself there under my own terms. I chose the end date, or at least I knew what the end date was in terms of the competition diary. There was an end point. Whereas in the military, most of what we're asked to do is outside of our control. We don't have a say on how, when, where, or even what we're doing. And we certainly don't have control over the end point. I suppose I can caveat that if anyone's an exercise director or coordinator and you've booked the bus for the end of the exercise, at least you know when you're going home. But my point being, if you set off on a war campaign, there's no end, or there's no set end date. For both Olympic campaigns I was part of, I knew the dates of my finals. They were etched in my diary and in the back of my mind, and everything I did was working towards those dates. And actually for both of them, I also knew probably the time of day I was going to be racing as well. So I was building to peaking my performance at the right time on that set day. However, to get to that end point, the path wasn't necessarily clear, and there were certainly things out of my control that I had to navigate along the way, which brings me on to resilience. And from a resilience perspective, how you bounce back from setbacks on your journey can make a difference towards whether you succeed or whether you fail. And failure at one point on the journey is not necessarily failure of the main goal. A good military phrase being, you can lose a battle, but you can still win the war. So if I talk a bit more about dealing with setbacks, success doesn't necessarily happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen all the time. In my sporting journey, I was really fortunate to experience relative success quite quickly. Helen and I joined the rowing team together in April 2010. And that summer we spent the race season racing in the pair, building experience every time we raced. By the time we came to the World Championships in November that year, I think our best result had been something like 5th at a World Cup. We were really ambitious and we set ourselves on winning a medal, but to the outside world, this confidence was maybe looked like it was unfounded. On paper, we had no kind of results to back up this ambition. What gave us the right to think that we could be on that podium? We came away from that World Championships with a silver medal. I think it was written in the press as being a surprise silver. But to us, it actually wasn't unfounded confidence. We had the training evidence to prove that we should be there. How we compared to our teammates was absolutely vital. We had joined a really strong squad. So we knew that every time we went out to train, we were racing and training alongside medal-winning crews. So we had the training evidence, and we could show that we could match our speeds on the water to those of crews that we knew were winning medals in an equivalent of a handicap time that we create within the squad. That experience we took forward to the following year in 2011. We were then unbeaten for the whole season, and we went to the World Championships in 2011 as favourites. And I suppose we went to that final with the physical evidence showing that we were champions. However, in the final meters of that race, we were beaten into silver. We were silver again. We might as well have come last. We were devastated by that result. In our minds, with another year of training, we hadn't progressed at all. We just produced the same result. What was all of that work for? But actually, that wasn't true. This is where perspective is so important. The main aim of that championships from a Team GB perspective was to qualify a pair for the London 2012 Olympics. We'd done that by coming in the top 6, and from the team, that was success. The Olympics is a 4-year cycle, so to be on the podium a year out is a really good place to be. So tick VG, well done us, we're on the right track. However, that wasn't our personal ambition, and that certainly wasn't our immediate goal for that year. And I think it's how we dealt with that disappointment, which I believe made us better the following year in 2012. DB trust, and open and honest conversations. These are all things we strive to do in the military. After action reviews on exercise, analysis of performance, and a whole list of lessons learned for a PXR. That's what we're all used to seeing. And you know what? It's better to be killed on an exercise or a TESX exercise than it is to be injured or even killed in real life. So taking opportunities to fail and learn are so important, and often the opportunities we're scared to exploit. For Helen and I, our post-race analysis was really focused on changing the things that we could control, not what we couldn't. And it was all about controlling the controllables. We couldn't influence the fact that we'd actually been ill in that World Championships week. Norovirus had gone around the squad, and most of the squad had been affected at some point during that week. So we actually weren't really at our best to be racing. But we knew we had a goal to go and achieve, and we knew we could kind of go and give it our best shot, so we did. It would have been a good excuse, and you know what, we could have accepted that and just said, you know what, we were ill, that's it where we were. But to accept that would not have been exploiting the opportunity that had been afforded us through our perceived failure. So what would we change? We'd strive to be good enough on it, even on our worst day. And this was a mantra that we kind of trained with the rest of my rowing career. What did this look like? Well, we set ourselves the target of training to a gold medal standard, and that would be being the best we could be on any given day. If I woke up feeling an 8 out of 10 one morning, you know what? That was an 8 day. And I did everything I could to be 8 out of 8. I didn't worry about what I couldn't do, but I focused on the things I could. I made the most of them. And that was everything from my physical training to my diet to my recovery, genuinely everything in my life. And how did this manifest itself? Well, we became more consistent in what we did, and that resulted in better results. Another thing we couldn't influence on that day in the summer of 2011 was the fact that our opposition had a wicked final sprint. We lost that race because we didn't have a change of pace. So what could we do about it? We invested in our race plan and our ability to change pace at any point in the race in order to remain in control and flexible. As I mentioned in my kind of opening slide, rowing, unlike any sport, it's all about what you can do in your own boat and in your lane. It's not about kind of returning an opponent's shot like in tennis. So no outside factors are actually needed for you to perform. It's all about you in your boat in your lane. However, if you can have another gear to go to, when you see someone else making a move in a race and taking up the pace, it gives you that ability to react and remain in control. So if I highlight just 3 things that I learned in that race in 2011 that really influenced the rest of my rowing career, they'd be perspective, setting ourselves the gold medal standard, and finding a way to remain in control. So we go on to communication. I don't think it's news to anyone in the military, the importance of this. Misunderstanding and misinterpretation, it's the easiest way to pull a team apart. For Helen and myself, it was something we made a real conscious effort with in 2014. So in 2013, I actually spent a year back with the Army, so we didn't spend a year together training and racing. Prior to our success in London 2012, we'd actually, essentially, Helen had learnt to row, sat behind me. So our kind of learning journey in rowing had been together. So there's a lot of things that were unsaid and unspoken between us. There were a lot of things that just came to us through habit. After having a period of time away, it was really important that we kind of went through the process of speaking about all the obvious and previously unspoken things. And this was to ensure that nothing was left to misinterpretation or misunderstanding. And this also prevented us kind of dealing with issues before they even became problems. I was very fortunate to be part of a team where we felt we could speak open and honestly, speak our minds. We could be constructive, we could discuss our concerns and talk through the issues. And of course, for this to work, you've got to ensure that what you think you're saying is what is actually being heard. This is something I think, in my experience in the Army, is not always done right. Precision of language is crucial, and we all know about this through the understanding and importance of voice procedure on a radio. However, often in face-to-face communications, I think when giving direction to subordinates, if an order is given and they're not followed directly, the person giving that order gets frustrated, and I'm absolutely guilty of this myself. Too often I pose a question when actually I'm giving direction. It's then unclear to the individual of what is being asked of them. And unfortunately, in a hierarchical organisation, people don't kind of feel comfortable questioning. So they just crack on as best they can and do what they think they've been told to do. Taking the time to ask someone to read back what they've been told to do can often be the most valuable time spent, I think. But ultimately, what's key is developing a culture in which everyone can ask questions and challenge. And this is not because people want to be difficult, it's because they may want to seek clarification and better understand the strategy being employed. Certainly for Helen and myself, in a small team of two, it could be really intensive at times. Two of you in a boat, working together 24/7. We went away on training camps. We lived in the same training room or same hotel room. We trained together. We barely spent spent any time more than 5 meters apart. So that was pretty intense for most of a year. So I think when each of us asked questions, we both really knew that it was kind of the question was being asked because we wanted to make ourselves better. And the understanding that we weren't asking questions to be awkward, that's really important. So if we go on to teamwork, Helen and I were the lucky ones to stand on the podium, but our success were absolutely down to the hard work of many more people, and most notably Robin, our coach. In the military, the frontline soldier is not there on their own, and it's quite literally an army of people behind them ensuring that they've got what they need to achieve their objectives, whether that's G4, G6, or quite frankly, any of the Gs or the Js. For me, in my time as an athlete, the key areas we trained in were on the water, on a rowing machine, and in the gym doing strength and conditioning. And it's important that all of these areas tied into each other. And that's why our strength and conditioning coach used to come out in the coaching launch to ensure the work that we were doing in the gym with her tied into the stuff we were doing on the water with Robin. Each area of training needed to complement and support each other. Otherwise, it was going to be ineffective training, and what was the point of doing it? Rowing is one of those sports as well where you want to be a power and an endurance athlete, and there's this constant balance of do you produce power or do you produce endurance? The more powerful you get, the less endurance you have. And that was a kind of a constant battle that the coaches used to have of kind of working out where was the optimum place to be. But this kind of links back to communication and also maximizing the experience of the team and the expertise of the team around you to ensure that the goals were being achieved. To achieve what Helen and I did, we had to learn to function as one. Like I said, we literally lived in each other's pockets for years. We had shared goals and aspirations. We took the time to really understand each other and what motivated each other, but most importantly, appreciated what one of us each individually brought to the team. From a motivation perspective, I've learned that I'm a very process-driven individual. Helen's a very outcome-driven individual. You could look at that and say, you've got two people who are driven by two different things, and that could be really contradictory and conflicting. But actually, she understood that I was motivated by the process. I knew she was motivated by the outcome. And actually, I would do everything I could to make sure the outcome was what she wanted. She'd do everything what she could to make sure that the process went the way I wanted it to do. And the two of us linked together made the perfect match. That's a little bit in hindsight. You can look back and see kind of why we did well at what we did. But if you can understand that at the beginning of your journey, it's so important and so valuable. So individual appreciation and working to our strengths enabled us to achieve. Our whole was definitely far greater than the sum of our parts. And that statement is no different from my experience during my military career. Most recently, working as a battery commander, I don't have all the answers, and I certainly don't have the expertise and the experience that the soldiers have within my battery. Ensuring each of them gets the opportunity to work to their strengths and doesn't feel that they're a failure for having areas to develop is something that I'm constantly working on. Because ultimately, that will make us better as a team, then we'll be better as individual soldiers, and eventually we will all perform to our potential. And that can only be a good thing. So in summary, I've covered off quite a lot. I'm not 100% certain I've kind of hit the brief of comparing and contrasting high performance in the military and elite sport, but hopefully I've highlighted some areas for discussions for people within your teams at work. Finally, if I can offer just these 3 points or these points to take away, I think fundamentally, I believe the success of a team is defined by its culture. And if there were 3 pieces of advice I'd have from both my experience in the military and elite sport, it would be these. To try and focus on controlling the controllables. When you're overwhelmed and working out what's important, what you can change or impact helps to keep the focus. And through building endurance and resilience helps you better react when dealing with the uncontrollables and it helps you remain flexible. Engendering a gold standard in your people, this is being able to perform when not at your peak. I see it as having a bit of a default setting of a high standard. When tired, wet and cold on exercise, you absolutely go into autopilot. it could be, and if this autopilot could be to a high standard, then results will still be achieved. And that was kind of my point earlier about striving for that standard, resulted in Helen and me being consistent and successful. And then finally, try and ensure that in your area of influence is a place where people feel free to communicate honestly. I accept that this is really hard in the military, and there's a balance to be made, but if people can feel valued, the team will be all the more successful for it.
Heather, thank you so much. That was fascinating, both from a personal perspective. And I'm sure I've certainly got lots of questions I'd like to chat to you about, both from what you're doing now, but also your phenomenally successful and very honest view of your career with the British Olympic team.